breaking news, I'm a father.
Okay, that's not that breaking. You've been a father for 5 months. The real breaking news is that you've been on pat leave for the last 2 months, and I have some questions.
Yes, my wife had our daughter 5 months ago. I've been on pat leave for 2 months, and so we wanted to do an episode talking all about the pat leave I've experienced, and we also got some audience questions all about pat leave as well. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So I'm really excited to grill you about pat leave. But first, new dad. How was your weekend?
Well, diaper change, read a baby book, walk around the neighborhood, get her to nap, repeat. Being a new dad is great, but I feel like I have no time for anything else. I'm squeezing every last second to be as productive as possible.
Okay, so I kind of feel bad saying this because obviously you're more busy than I am being a new dad and all, but I feel the same. It makes me extra mad when I spend even a minute too long working on stuff that doesn't matter.
Well, you should feel bad about saying that, but I'll tell you my dad-approved hack. It's Gamma. It allows you to create professional presentations, websites, social media posts, and documents in minutes instead of hours. Gamma takes your messy notes or outline and instantly transforms them into stunning content that's ready to share.
That's more time working on things that actually matter and less time formatting slides.
See how much time you'd save. Try it for free today at gamma.app/PMLE. That's GAMMA.app/PMLE.
All right, now let's get into the dad talk. First,
let's do it, Kayla.
I actually did some research. I have some stats.
Okay.
So the average maternity leave in the U.S. is 10 weeks on average.
Maternity leave.
Okay. The average paternity leave, 1 week in the U.S.
Yeah.
So that's a huge differential. Obviously, you're taking the full 3 months that are allowed by Morning Brew. But have you noticed any pushback to that? Maybe not from Morning Brew, but from
No, I haven't noticed any pushback from Morning Brew. And I was also looking up the state of kind of paid family leave in America, and it's grim. We're basically, of the richest countries in the world, the country that offers the least amount of protections for families in this particular instance. There's no federal paid family leave policy. There's a federal unpaid family leave policy, which what does that accomplish?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not quite sure what that.
It basically
they can't fire you.
They can't fire you if you go off for 3 months.
But you don't get paid.
Yeah.
What I looked up for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 27% of private sector employees have access to paid family leave, irrespective of employer size. My hunch is that as employee size grows, the access to it increases as well. We mentioned that there's no federal paid family leave, but states do have some paid family leave policies. New York is one of them that has, I think it's like a 12-week paid family leave policy, and you coordinate that with your employer. So it's pretty sad and pretty grim in America, the state of family leave. Your question about pushback, I definitely have not gotten any pushback at Morning Brew. I think it's been really nice, quite frankly. There's never been someone who's kind of like side-eyed, like, are you going to really take all 3 months? Super supportive. No one is really messaging me on Slack unless like I'm doing the asking. And I put together a pretty comprehensive plan, and, massive credit to everyone else at the company, which it does require them to step up a little bit and cover some of the things that I was doing. And people have been so gracious about that. And so I feel this is sincere, very blessed to have had a child while employed at this company, because you hear horror stories all the time where it's not as smooth as it's been at Morning Brew.
Yeah, I think I agree. Just on the other side of like working with you, I think first you've done a really good job of making it clear what things are being passed off to whom and like who you should be contacting if you have questions about X, Y, or Z, and also where you are still contactable. And so I think that that's been really helpful to like make this process potentially as smooth as it can be, especially because 3 months is not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but it is a lot when you're like looking down the barrel of a 3 month time away.
Yeah. And you might be asking, Kyle, you're on pat leave, but here you are in a studio at Morning Brew recording an episode. That feels a little like work, and yeah, you probably would be right, but I've cleared this with HR. And because I'm talent.
Right. Talent is different than employees.
Talent is different, okay? I really just wanted HR to say I'm talent. That made me feel good. So I've been doing some stuff, but again, on my timeline. And so we've been strategic about when we would record and when I would come in. And I've always been in a position where I've had help. Like my mom is here this week. She can watch Harlan for a few hours when I come in. So that's been really nice. Before we get into maybe some more reflections and questions, I read this really great New York Times article that was, I think, titled "What Paternity Leave Does to a Father's Brain." And it was basically a compilation of all the studies that they've done about pat leave in, I think, mainly other countries, because it's been pretty sad here in the U.S. So let me share some of these with you, because they really stuck out to me. And I think it also underscores how important family leave is, not just for families, not just for the children of those families, but also, I think, for society as a whole. So in one study, they followed 6,000 couples, and they saw that for families where the father took at least 1 week of pat leave, the couple was 26% more likely to stay married, which makes sense. And I think there's some confounding factors, like if you're in a position to be able to take paternity leave, you typically are employed at a pretty good company. And, so take this, again, I'll take them all with a grain of salt, but together I think they paint a picture. And then they also found that your relationship with your children was stronger when they did surveys at 9 years old, even just taking 1 or 2 weeks off as a father for pat leave. They've also measured social cognition, and this was a Japanese study. They showed that fathers' brains looked much more like mothers' brains. When you go on pat leave or mat leave, it actually reduces some of the gray matter in your brain, which seems like a bad thing, but they've assured me it's actually like good and lets you like focus more or something. I don't know the exact science behind it, but basically after that, fathers reacted to images of children in a much more active way after they've done pat leave compared to fathers that did not do any pat leave. The Journal of Child and Family Studies showed that there was massive benefits to mothers when fathers took pat leave, including increased sleep, decreased stress and depression levels for moms. And they actually did a follow-up study, a Swedish study, which showed that mothers were 14% less likely to seek care for postpartum depression if father took pat leave, and they were 26% less likely to go on anti-anxiety prescriptions, again, when a father took pat leave as opposed to not taking it. So it was interesting to hear those studies and how it's not just beneficial for the dad, obviously, but also for the family unit, and I think society writ large.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think what's interesting here, first of all, this makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If you're more active in your child's life, your significant other is less stressed, they feel more supported, and you have a stronger relationship with your child.
Yeah.
Like that feels like a no-brainer. And I think the fact that all elements of work are designed to make that decision challenging is it should be the easiest decision in the world to step back for a little bit because of all those benefits that you just outlined. One thing I'd like, first of all, I think we should step back a little bit.
Okay.
And can you tell me how it's been? Like, are you having a good time? Like, what does your day look like?
Yeah, I'm having a great time. And for me, it feels like a very unique time in my life where, maybe we have more kids in the future, but like I've pretty much been working straight since I got out of college, like very little breaks, if any breaks. And so one, it's just a unique time where I'm not as focused on work as I have been routinely. We did an episode about sabbaticals, and I do think whether you're having a kid or not, there is real power in occasionally stepping back and realizing the blind spots you might have had of work, or like what being not stressed in the work way feels like. And so I think there's just real value in doing that. And then second, like my daughter will never be this age again. And it's just a really special time. And again, going back, like I feel really blessed to be employed at Morning Brew at this time because I really have been able to like enjoy it and spend a ton of time with her and like learn all of her like mannerisms and see her come a little more online and be a little more expressive. And it's interesting talking to Sierra, my wife, which one, like she had it a lot harder. She actually had to give birth to our daughter, and she took mat leave. She's back at work now. And it's interesting because when I was on pat leave, I'd come back home and Sierra would understand all these idiosyncrasies that I didn't
when you weren't on pat leave.
When I wasn't on pat leave.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh, I'm telling her like, oh, like I know how to like specifically rock Harlan to sleep for a nap because it changes every single day. And so I feel like more of the kind of subject matter expert on the day-to-day life of my daughter now, which is a really empowering feeling. And Sierra said that too, like she feels a lot more comfortable now that I know how to do everything. And it's just reps. Like before I wasn't getting as many reps as her, and now that's starting to even out. Obviously she's still doing a ton, but that's been just really, really special.
That's great. And I think that's interesting because for me, before you structured your paternity leave in this way, I didn't even know it was possible. But like,
oh, interesting.
So you basically, your child was born in February.
Yeah.
Your wife took her 3
She had
months.
16 weeks, so about 4 months.
But you had it. So she did 3 months of solo mat leave.
Yep.
And then you came on.
Yep.
With a month left for her.
Yeah.
And so then you guys had a month overlap, and then now you're the primary parent right now, and you know your wife is back at work.
Yeah, and honestly, I've only done this once, so it's tough to know what the counterfactual would be, but I loved this setup, and that would be my recommendation. Like it just worked very well where she could take her mat leave, watch Harlan for the most part, and then we had this handoff period where like we both got to be together with the family, which was really special. And now she's back at work and I can cover, and it's extended, quite frankly, the runway before we have to put her in a daycare, which in New York is crazy expensive. We can get into that, but I've really appreciated both the solo time with Harlan, but also that middle family time we shared together.
So that being said, you are having this like it's like your day job right now to take care of this little tiny thing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like what's the biggest difference between your experience with this and Sierra's? Like when she comes back to work, how was that experience versus yours right now?
When Sierra went back to her current job. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. Like, I'm still learning all about this, and I'm not an expert, and I don't want to speak specifically for her, but I think it does change you. And one of the questions we got from our audience was like, how do you think about prioritization after having a baby? And I wish I could like get up here and say like, oh, you can do it all. And like, you could totally have a baby and have a family and have all the same friends and do just as great job at work and spend all that. You just can't. Like that to me is the honest truth. You have less time to focus on other things because you're spending time focusing on family and on your child. And so I think your prioritization does change. I would say that you have to give up something, and whether that's you don't see as many friends as often or your circle gets a little smaller. You certainly cannot go to the same many restaurants and bars and stuff you were doing pre-child, particularly in New York, because you just can't. And then work is interesting. I think you still definitely can do as good of a job and maybe even better as a job. I think you just get a lot better at ruthlessly prioritizing. And I think that's what Sierra is experiencing now going back is like, okay, I still want to be great and excellent at my job. I still can be. I have a little more stuff I have to worry about on the family side. I really have to deeply understand the levers I push to be excellent at my job. And she's doing an amazing job at that. And I think it's harder for moms in that way because she's still feeding Harlan, and so she still has to do all that stuff, and that never goes away at this point. So it's tougher for her. I haven't transitioned back to work yet, but yeah, you have to be smart about what you're giving up, I think.
Yeah. So on that note, you're 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about, and what are you most worried about returning to office?
Yeah. So my take on returning to office, which was another question we got, it was like, you know, if you work for a company that has an always on kind of high performance hustle culture, and then you take leave, how do you come back and integrate into that? My working theory right now is that the worst thing you can do is try to come back and make everything exactly how it was. I do think that it's a big change and you have to embrace that change, and you almost have to come back expecting work to be very different. And what I mean about that is when you leave, other people step up. And actually, we can talk about this more. I think it's a great opportunity for companies to have that experience where someone steps away and new people take on new tasks. Sometimes they find better ways to do it. Sometimes they realize we don't even need to be doing this at all. Sometimes they realize, wait, like this would work better with this workflow over here, and they combine things. And I think you often get in a habit of working the same way until a disruptive force comes in. And so sometimes stepping back allows for innovation to really continue and to have an effect on the organization. So I think that's really good. So like, my plan to come back is to sit down with the people that covered some of my tasks and then Robert, my boss, and be like, what was your reflections on when I was out? Like, what was the added workload like? What did you realize about the workload? What can be what do you want to keep? What do you want to give back? And then have the same conversation with Robert. And my hope is that by stepping out, other people got new opportunities. They get to keep some of the stuff they really like to do, and they're rewarded for that in some capacity. And then when I come back, I take back the stuff that maybe no one wanted or that I was particularly gifted at doing, and I find new opportunity that was also discovered in my absence to take on, and everyone gets to grow. That's my hope. You know, it sounds nice on paper. We'll see how it plays out in reality.
So maybe in a few months we can revisit and see how your re-onboarding actually went and any like problems you may have faced or things. And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show. But is there something that you're, particularly worried about?
I mean, I think everyone's worried about being as good at their job as they used to be. At least that's been my experience with Sierra in our conversations. So yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about having a little less time to focus on work. And as someone a lot of my identity is tied up in work, and a lot of my self-affirmation and how I feel about myself, quite frankly, is how I'm performing at work. Whether right, wrong, or otherwise, that's the truth. And so when you have something that could potentially negatively impact something that is big to your identity is scary. Now, on the flip side, I have this whole new identity as a dad, and that is incredibly rewarding. And so that's been, I think, the big net positive is like, wow, I have this whole other identity that I didn't have before that just feels really special and is almost a buttress against other identities I had. And if I can't perform as well as X, Y, or Z, I can't be as good of a friend or I can't be as good of an employee, I have this other identity that's really, really important and really special that still gives me purpose and makes me feel whole. So yeah, I am worried about it, but I'm not in like a crisis mode. I think it is all going to work out.
I think you're probably right.
And like, look, like we work with a ton of parents at Morning Brew, and I've never been like, parent, like they're probably going to be a shitty coworker. Like, no, they're like some of the best. And also I think it's a test of like ruthless prioritization. It's expansive to who you are as a person, and you bring that into work. And so, yeah, again, I think we're quite lucky to work at Morning Brew when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. So going back to the listener question, talking about always on.
Yeah.
I think one of your, how do I say this nicely? One of your strengths.
Anyone who says that means weakness. One
of your strengths and things that I think you could have done better on is that you're always on.
Yeah.
If I sent you a message at 11 o'clock, like you're locked in and you have a thought on like strategy or whatever, like how are you thinking about that? Like, are you going to have better boundaries with work?
I think you have to because, yeah, if I'm holding Harlan, if I'm playing with Harlan, I'm not checking my phone. So I have less just availability of checking that stuff. So I probably won't be as always on, but I think where that comes from for me is that I genuinely really do like my job. And if I'm not working, I'm thinking about work because I like what I do. Like, for example, tonight I have this like media mastermind group that I started that's like 4 other media people that work at different companies. And we meet once a month to talk about like some issues we're going through and brainstorm solutions. Like, that's not Morning Brew is not making me
Right.
do that. I just really like media. I want to be excellent at my job. That's really fun for me. So I do it. So always on is not like I feel a pressure to be always on
Right.
and someone's going to fire me if I'm not, which is very negative. It is, I like what I do and I'm blessed to be able to love what I do and I want to go all in. So that's where the always on comes from. So I think it comes from a healthier place. But yes, I just won't be able to, respond to every message at 11 p.m.
Right.
Quite frankly, I'm asleep at 11 p.m. now.
Yeah,
so there's no way I'm responding.
Well, so I think there's a difference here at Morning Brew. Always on is a choice. I mean, you're probably not going to get that many pings at Morning Brew beyond like 8 p.m. if something is going really wrong. Maybe you'll get something late. But like it's a pretty good work-life balance here. And so for you, you're kind of opting into that, thinking about work often, going above and beyond. If you were giving advice to somebody who was coming back to work where the always on is not opt-in, but it is expected. You work maybe in a finance or an industry that requires more hours. How would you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to give unsolicited advice, but I guess that is what this podcast is.
I'm soliciting it. Yeah.
If it wasn't called Per My Last Email, we should have named it unsolicited advice. Look, like everything, like it depends on what your goals are. And I've known people and in previous jobs worked for people who had a very demanding job, always on for a long time. What I've found for those people is that the pay is really good. And so it's a trade-off where I think they've decided that they can afford their family a certain lifestyle that on the whole is net beneficial by working more and being a little on. And I don't fault anyone for that. I think the calculus makes sense. Everyone has different priorities. And then I think the other thing that they do exceptionally well is they recognize that it's not necessarily the quantity of time spent with all the people you want to spend it with, but the quality of time. And so if you have to be quote unquote like always on, I think it's really critical to carve out at least an hour where when you're with your family, your child, your significant other, your partner, whatever it might be, you're really present.
Right.
And I think that's where, I mean, you see it with friends all the time. You'll go hang out with a friend and they're not really hanging out with you. Like they're checking their phone. You like have a conversation, they don't respond because they're like, writing an email. I think that's actually worse. I'd rather be like, take care of that and then let's engage. So I think you just have to be intentional about that. And I would say like there's two words that have really bubbled to the surface during my pat leave. And the first one is intentionality. I just want to be very intentional. Like when I'm at work and I'm doing what I need to do. And then when I'm with my daughter or with my family, I'm very intentional about being present with them. And I'm not doing a shitty job all the time. I'm like really focused in chunks about doing the best job I can for whatever that situation is. The second one is surrender. Again, it goes back to this theme of like not fighting for what used to be and accepting now what is and kind of surrendering to it. Like I could really try to be always on when I'm watching Harlan and it wouldn't work. And it's just not possible. And instead surrendering to that moment, accepting that moment for like what it is and embracing that moment, to me, then that leads to, not to be like Zen, but like that is happiness. Like you're just focused on the moment you have.
Right.
So those are like the two words that I think I'm continuously working on, but those have really bubbled to the surface for me.
Yeah. I really like that. I think that's great. It's like pretty Zen.
All right. Well, you got
very
philosophical.
Buddhist of you.
Don't invite a philosophy on your podcast. I have some questions for you just to mix it up.
Sure.
If that's cool. Not that it needs to be based all on my experience, but you've seen several people take Matt and Pat leave at Morning Brew. Like, has that affected your perception of what you want to do on your leave? If you ever had a leave, has it affected your perception of, wanting to stay in your career and be a mom? Like, just talk me through any reflections you've had about that.
Yeah. So transparently, like for a really long time, I was pretty confident that motherhood or parenthood wasn't a path for me.
Yeah.
And wasn't something I was interested in. And over the past few years, that has shifted. And I'd say, like, I just also am not around babies a lot.
Same.
At all. I haven't held a baby in years.
Except for Harlan.
Right. Well, so what changed? I mean, it was like seeing Harlan and being like, oh yeah, Kyle's just like a dude.
If that guy could be a dad, yeah, I could be a mom. Don't worry about it.
No, I mean, yeah, basically.
No, truly,
like
though.
literally.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're just like a dude, and like you're not like all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, of course Kyle's a dad. Like he's such a dad. Like, yeah, you are such a dad, first of all, but you've always like, and I was just like, oh, it's like crazy. You're just like this guy, and you also have a kid, and like that hasn't necessarily fundamentally altered your personality or your life. Obviously, it's changed your priorities. So that was very reassuring. I also think it's been really reassuring to see not just you, but also other people taking parental leave and seeing it like not be that big of a deal. Like I think when I was younger, it was like, you cannot take maternity leave when it's inconvenient for your career or like inconvenient for the company, because then you will be left behind. And I'm sure that there are some elements of that, like those concerns still remain. But what I've seen, especially at Morning Brew, and again, this is, it's
perception.
It's perception, is that like, we're going to figure it out. And it doesn't mean that Kyle no longer has a position here because we were able to pick up the slack for a few months. It means like, we were able to kind of stretch, and we're going to be able to make space again when you return.
The rubber band comes back after you've stretched it a bit.
And so I think it has been very encouraging to see. It's still not necessarily in the like near term plan for me, but now I know that if it's a decision that I make, it's not one that I have to really stress about in terms of the implications for my career.
Yeah. I appreciate the transparency, and it's interesting because there are a ton of statistics, and I think they're mainly geared towards women that show like you kind of do face a penalty for having a child in terms of career, particularly those that do take mat leave. And I think we need to figure out a way where that ceases to be true. And so I can only imagine feeling like, well, I want to be as successful in my career as possible, and like I deserve that, and I want to have a family. And I look at these stats and I'm like, shit, there appears to be a tension between these two things. And that must be a really hard thing to navigate.
Yeah, and it is. And something that's been a little bit clarifying for me is that childless women also face similar penalties in their career.
You're like, turns out just women face them.
Yeah. So this is something that we've been doing for something separate, like research for, it's called the broken rung phenomenon. And it's like childless women are also not seeing promotions at the same rates as men. So when I saw that stat and really internalized it, it was like, if I'm going to be penalized either way, I might as well make the decision that's the best for me.
Yeah.
And I know it's different. I mean, I'm sure that motherhood poses a specific set of challenges in your career that I'm not even anticipating, right?
Yeah.
Besides just the like, oh, I think that you're too busy with your kids to like deal with the work appropriately, so I'm not going to hire you or whatever. Or like, oh, you're of a child rearing age, so I'm not going to invest in you because you could like leave me for 3 months.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's other stuff, and of course, as someone who's not a mom, I can't even anticipate those. So I'm not saying it's like hard either way, therefore it doesn't matter. It's going to be very, very challenging for somebody as a mom to work. But there's something kind of comforting about knowing that I'm going to be penalized no matter what.
We'd like to change that, but you know, if that is the state of reality, you might as well then do what you want to do. It's interesting. I think you bring up a really good point, which is I think there's either a perception that employers think this way, or like some employers genuinely do think this way, which is mat leave, pat leave, family leave, whatever it's called, is bad because I lose worker.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Right.
And so I was doing some research on this, and the current studies show, whatever that, you know, really entails, 90% of companies report that there's no effect to the bottom line when, you know, one person goes out on pat leave or mat leave. And actually, I do think the tide is turning where you aren't able to attract top talent without offering some of these benefits, including mat and pat leave. And my hope is that, you know, again, I think companies, their goal is to make money. And so you have to frame these arguments in terms of economic impact, that actually you have to do this because great people won't work for your company unless you don't. And then also, like, when they do, I do think framing it as it's an opportunity for your team to grow, learn new things, find better ways to do it. It comes back and you're actually like a refreshed and recharged organization. I think that is the way to frame it, to convince employers that it's a good policy.
Yeah, I'm aligned.
Yeah. The other thing I want to say is the New York specific geography and culture is very interesting. Like, what's been hard personally is Sierra and I are basically the first of my very close friends in New York. And apologies if you are a very close friend and you have a baby. You're slipping my mind right now. That had a baby. Like, we don't hang out with other kids, with other families that have babies. And she's not old enough to start daycare or school where you kind of meet those people. That's been really challenging.
Yeah.
And that feels like a pretty New York phenomenon, because in my experience at the city, it attracts people that are very career focused, very career ambitious. And so you run into this tension we're talking about where they don't want to take time off. They don't want to face this mat leave penalty or pat leave penalty. And so it pushes out childbirth later, and or just not at all, or now there's great technologies like IVF and stuff like that maybe allow you to delay it even further, which I'm all in favor for. But that's been very challenging, where one, you're not exposed to families with babies at this age as much as you would maybe be in the Midwest. And so it feels a little unnatural. But then two, you don't want to be the first.
Right.
You're like, damn, I wish we had other friends that were experiencing this together, so we had this little community. I think that's really important. And so, my advice for cities, whether, no one is probably going to take this to heart, but I do think that's really important. And, we're not trying to move out of New York yet. I love this job. I want to be in person. But it definitely starts creeping into your mind, like, okay, like, is the city family friendly enough? And you start talking about daycare expenses and all this. And it's a really expensive city for families. And, it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah. I've had a friend who told me that her birth timeline is just 6 to 12 months after me.
Yeah, it's like someone else has got to
get started, I'll get started.
Yeah, literally, someone else has got to do this. The last thing I'll say, maybe you have other questions, but one thing I did want to hit on is I was talking to a family friend who runs a very small consulting firm in a particular niche industry. I think he has like 10 employees maybe. And we were visiting him and his family, and we were talking about my pat leave, and he was just quite honest. He was like, yeah, if like 2 or 3 people took pat or mat leave at the same time at my company, like, I'd be screwed.
Yeah.
And so I do think that's a real recognition that, like, you might be running your own business, and it's just like the economic truth when you're a small company that, like, it might be hard to fix a gap when 3 employees are 30% of your workforce. And that is why, personally, I think we need to, whether it's state, federal, like, we have to find out some sort of solution where we can protect those companies and those people. Because what I think sucks then is basically you're saying, okay, well, you can never, no one who's going to have a kid is going to want to work for you.
Right.
There's a lot of talented people that want to have children. And so I feel like we're penalizing both the people that work there, but also the people running the businesses. And that's where I think this is not just a family issue, but it feels like a state or national issue.
Yeah.
I don't have the solutions, but I've just heard that from several people where, like, they're like, I wish I could, but I just can't offer this to my employees.
Right. And it feels like it hits the smaller businesses much more than the bigger businesses.
Yeah. Meta can afford, like,
of course. Well, because
they're offering $100 million to an AI researcher.
Yeah, $1 billion. They're fine. They're like, oh yeah, take 3 months, take 6. That's fine. We don't care.
We didn't even know you worked here still. We'll just keep paying you. Like, it's way different. Yeah. When you get smaller.
So it feels like maybe there's some like state or federal interventions that could help make that more tenable.
Yeah.
Seems slightly unrealistic anytime soon, but maybe eventually.
The one other thing I want to mention that has kind of been
the last
sorry,
thing.
yeah, I've said that many times. That I want to mention that has been a big realization is, we're really lucky. I mean, one, you could say, well, you should be able to take 3 months off no matter what. But in America, I'm very lucky to work for an employer that is giving me 3 months paid leave. And what I think is also pretty bad about the system we have in the US is, to me, that is only furthering the advantages that a certain select group of people have while creating more disadvantage to those that are already disadvantaged. If you work for a great company and you make a great salary and it's a large company, you're afforded time off to be with your kids. And you're not going to have to take a financial penalty for doing so. If you do not work for a company that has paid family leave, or you work an hourly job where that's not afforded to you, that's not even consideration. Okay, now you have a child. You are probably going to have to spend less time with your kid unless you have some sort of financial situation where you don't need to do that. And when I just think of who's advantaged in society and who's disadvantaged in society, I think the current system benefits those who are advantaged and doesn't benefit at all those who are disadvantaged. And to me, like, we should be working on a solution that allows more equality across who gets to raise a family in the way that they want to raise it. And so, again, I don't have solutions, but that's just been a realization I've had on leave.
Yeah, and that's also, we're talking about paternity, like maternity, like people are giving birth and then are expected to show up to work a few days later.
How?
Which is like madness.
Right.
So I 100% aligned, and I'm sure that has been even more stark for you as you've started to experience that.
Yeah. So if anyone has a solution to fixing this hard, complex problem, we're all ears. So I know
Maybe
a lot
we could start with paid federal leave.
I know a lot of smart people are working on it. We're certainly not. We just sit on the sidelines and
we're just
yap.
chatting.
Yeah. Well, those are my reflections on.
Yeah, I mean, I had like 18 more questions, but maybe we'll do a revisit in a few months after you're actually back.
See if what I predicted actually comes true.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for listening to my rants about pat leave. And should we roll the credits?
Let's do it.
Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Our technical director is Uchenna Ogu.
Our president is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. Enjoy children or no children, whatever you prefer. I'm just going to end every debate we have on the show with, well, as a father.
Yeah, perfect.
As a father of a daughter.
I am pretty well equipped to answer this.
I think I know a thing or two about women. Okay.